Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about products that are not dupes. There are a bunch of different dupe videos going around the internet, on TikTok especially, talking about dupes, and I just don't agree with what they're saying. So I kind of wanted to set the record straight. I know there's a lot of brands these days that are coming out with very intentional dupes in the same packaging, but then when you go to try the product, it's just not the same. And when I post dupe videos here on my channel, I always try to make sure that if it's not exactly the same, I tell you guys and I say it's similar, or maybe this is a good alternative at the drugstore. I just think that the word dupe in general is just becoming overused and people are starting to apply it to anything that might be even remotely similar. So those are the products we're going to be talking about in today's video. If you're new here and you like unsponsored makeup content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. Okay, first I have a really ridiculous one. So I've seen this going around online. The Jones Road What the Foundation, which comes in a little pot. It's a cream foundation. Everybody over on TikTok was trying to say that the L'Oreal Age Perfect Tinted Balm is the same, that it's a dupe for this, and they couldn't be more wrong. These products are not the same at all. The Jones Road Foundation is actually a fluffy, sort of a whip texture. You could scoop it right out of the jar, and it has a very oily consistency. I have dry skin, and I couldn't stand this because it just was way too rich, way too oily. It really didn't have a lot of coverage to it, and it also has a very strong kind of herbal scent to it, which I wasn't a fan of either. In contrast, the L'Oreal Age Perfect Balm is more like a balm texture. It's not that whipped moussey feel, and it's definitely not as greasy as the Jones Road. It's also not as thick. When you apply this, it just sinks right in like a second skin with no greasy after feel. It also doesn't have a lot of coverage. It is skin tint, kind of similar to the Jones Road, but that's pretty much the only thing that these two have in common. The L'Oreal foundation also doesn't have a scent to it, and between the two of these, I much prefer the L'Oreal. Even with my dry skin, like I said, I felt like the Jones Road was way too greasy. I felt sticky throughout the day. This one is just a perfect light tint with none of the stickiness or oiliness, and also without that strong herbal scent. So I feel like when people saw the hype around the Jones Road, they just ran to the drugstore and tried to find something in a similar type of jar packaging and then said, we'll call it a dupe, but it's really completely different. Next up, when it comes to the Charlotte Tilbury Pinkgasm blush, there have been tons of dupes out there for this because it is such a viral product, and at one point it sold out and you couldn't get it for months and months. So everybody was looking for alternatives. It is back now. It's much easier to get than it was before, but it's a little bit on the expensive side. And one of the brands that tried to dupe this product is e.l.f., and they came out with their Halo Glow Beauty Wand back in the spring. It comes in very similar packaging. It has the sponge tip applicator, and everybody was rushing to say that this was a Charlotte Tilbury dupe. And I completely believe that e.l.f. is trying to dupe this product intentionally, but I just don't feel like they are similar at all. The Charlotte Tilbury one, much more pigmented, and when you go to blend it out on your skin, it just looks a lot smoother. It sits on the skin really nicely. It has a lot of glow to it, but also you get that color to show up. It's a really beautiful blush. But the e.l.f. one, on the other hand, while the color sort of looks the same, it's not nearly as pigmented, and when you go to blend this out, it fades a lot. It doesn't retain that color like the Charlotte Tilbury does. It also has a little bit of a sheen to it, but it's not nearly as glowy as the Charlotte Tilbury, which some people, I guess, may prefer, especially if you have textured skin. The Charlotte Tilbury one could potentially highlight that with a lot of glow going on. And then another thing about the e.l.f. that I'm not crazy about is just that when you go to blend it out, it looks a little bit patchy and it tends to lift up my foundation underneath, whereas I don't really have that issue with the Charlotte Tilbury. So there's something in the e.l.f. formula that must just be a little bit more sticky maybe. It just doesn't seem to have the same kind of glide on the skin. Now, I'm not saying that the e.l.f. is a bad product by any means. I can definitely make it work. I think if you want the same intensity as the Charlotte Tilbury, you have to build up the e.l.f. product, and then in doing so, it tends to get even more patchy because it doesn't stick to the layer underneath. It really doesn't layer well. So is the e.l.f. a similar product? Yes. Is it a dupe for Charlotte Tilbury? No. The next one I have seen a ton of comparisons for, and that's the Flower Beauty Plump Up Gloss Stick and the Tarte Maracuja Juicy Lip Plump. So they come in almost identical packaging. They have this sort of click pen style applicator. Both of them have plumping formulas, and even some of the colors that they come in are really super close as well. So I can definitely see why people would want to compare these two. However, the formulas are completely different. When you apply the Tarte one, it's very thick. It's super glossy. It's like a lip gloss in a stick, basically. So you just get tons of shine and you can really feel the product sitting on your lips. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily sticky. It's just very thick and you're just kind of aware of it. Whereas the Flower Beauty one is a lot thinner of a texture. It still feels like a melty sort of a lip balm, but it's not nearly as glossy. And like I said, it's a little bit on the thinner side. So once I put the Flower Beauty balm on, it tingles for a few minutes, so I kind of know it's there. And then once the tingling goes away, I forget that I even have it on, whereas the Tarte one, I can definitely feel it throughout the day. So again, I really don't see these two as being super similar. I think if I had to compare the Flower Beauty to something, it would be maybe the Makeup by Mario plumping lip balms. It feels more similar to those. It does still have the melty texture, but it's just not as glossy as the Tarte. So I really would not compare these two, even though they're in really similar packaging. I've also seen this one floating around a lot. It's the Makeup Revolution Ultimate Nudes Light Palette versus the Huda Nude Light Palette. They didn't even bother changing the name. I know Revolution is pretty notorious for duping high-end makeup, and normally it doesn't live up to my expectations, and in this case, it also did not. So I've had the Huda Nude Light Palette for years now, and it's one of my favorite palettes that she's ever done because the colors are just beautiful. They're right up my alley. I'm actually wearing it today, and I haven't worn this in a long time, but this video kind of made me dig it back out again, and I'm keeping it out for a while because I always love how my eye looks come out. It's just beautiful. What I love about it the most is the shimmer shades. You have this one over here that's a beautiful duochrome. This lavender almost has like a little bit of a shift to it. The colors all just have so much dimension, and when you wear it, I feel like it just makes your eyes pop. The formula is also extremely easy to work with, and with the shimmer shades, I just pick them up with a finger and apply them, and they look gorgeous. But the Makeup Revolution version, not only is it not as pigmented, but I just feel like the shimmer shades don't have the special quality that the Huda ones do. They come off as being a bit more flat. Again, they're not bad shadows. You can make them work. But if I look at the shadows side by side next to the Huda Beauty ones, there's just no comparison. I think the Revolution ones just fall flat to me. And like I said, I have to kind of work to build these up a little bit more to get them to show up on me. So if the Huda Beauty Nude Light Palette isn't in your budget, I think this is a nice drugstore alternative. It has very similar shades at a really good price. And like I said, I don't think the formula is bad, but would I call this a dupe? Definitely not. I prefer the Huda one so much more. I just don't think there's any comparison between the formulas. This next one is a product that came out very recently, and it's the e.l.f. Squeeze Me Lip Balm. So I saw a ton of people talking about how it's a dupe for the Laneige Lip Glowy Balm. I guess because they kind of come in similar packaging. The e.l.f. one comes in a bunch of different flavors, and the Laneige one does as well. I have Gummy Bear in the Laneige, and the e.l.f. one, I think it's grape. Yes, grape. So despite the different names, they actually do smell almost identical. So I think that's pretty much the only thing that I find similar about these. I find the Laneige one to have a slightly thicker, almost gel-like consistency, while the e.l.f. one comes out of the tube a little bit thicker, but once it hits the warmth of your skin, it melts down into a very thin, almost oil-like texture. Again, this is a situation where I honestly don't mind the feel of the e.l.f. lip balm. It was actually fine at first, but as I've kind of used it over time, I've noticed that I think the e.l.f. one doesn't hydrate as well as the Laneige for me. I think maybe the Laneige just lasts a little bit longer on my lips and just it keeps the hydration longer, whereas this one, like, it starts out good, but it just doesn't last. Maybe it's because the formula thins out so much into sort of an oil, and then I just find that it disappears quickly. I do think it's good in a pinch, and it's a nice affordable alternative to something like this, but the tube is also really small. It just looks like a deluxe sample almost. And I have to say, the Ride or Die lip balms, they used to have, which I think this is replacing, were so much better in my opinion. I know there were people who didn't like those because of how thick they were and they were harder to squeeze out of the tube, but I just felt like they were so much more hydrating than this one and they just lasted a really long time on your lips. So all that to say, I just don't feel like these two are exact dupes. I like the e.l.f. one, but I like the Laneige a little bit better. I've also seen some videos where people were comparing the new Moira shadow pots to the Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize. And when I first saw these, I thought the exact same thing. And I have already addressed this in a video, but for those of you who didn't see, the Moira version is called the Everlust Shimmer Cream Shadow. And when I first got these, my mind immediately went to Charlotte Tilbury because it's like a moussey shadow in a pot. So I grabbed my Charlotte Tilbury one and I did a comparison back for that other video I was talking about. So here we have Charlotte Tilbury's Rose Gold, and I'm not sure what color this Everlust shadow is because it's not on the packaging itself. So I'll look it up and I'll just put it on the screen. But when you look at the two side by side, they actually look like a really similar color. They're both like a peachy nude. And when I apply the Charlotte Tilbury one to my eye, it just goes on so seamlessly. It's very, very smooth, and it leaves a beautiful soft sheen that doesn't look glittery. It doesn't look sparkly. It just gives my lids a little bit of a glow. Whereas on the Moira side, this one felt very similar going on, but as I was applying it, I noticed, number one, it's not as pigmented. It's definitely a lot more sheer. And number two, one thing that I noticed is the Moira version has like these little tiny flecks of glitter that are not as evenly dispersed into the product as the Charlotte Tilbury are. So when I look at my eyelid, I can see just these little individual sparkles of glitter, whereas on the Charlotte Tilbury side, it's just more of a refined shimmer that just goes all throughout the product and you can't really pick out where it is. The effect is just more of an all-over sheen. So my first thought was that the Moira shadows just don't look quite as seamless on the eyes as the Charlotte Tilbury do. The other thing is that the Moira ones creased on me part of the way through the day, and they kind of got a little bit patchy, whereas the Charlotte Tilbury one didn't crease and it lasted throughout the day. It still looked smooth. I think it just sets down better. So for me, I really do prefer the Charlotte Tilbury version in this case. Even though I love Moira, I'm a huge fan of their products, this was one that just really didn't work for me. And I think if it didn't crease or get patchy throughout the day, like if it lasted, I would give this one a better rating than I did, even if it doesn't look as pigmented as the Charlotte Tilbury. I felt like it still looked fine on my eyes. I think the biggest disappointment for me was just that it didn't last as long. So I just really don't see these two as being dupes. Another comparison I've been seeing everywhere is the Dior Lip Glow Oil versus the NYX Fat Oil. So again, I feel like people are saying this because it's a tinted liquid lip balm and they basically have almost identical applicators. But I feel like a lot of brands are creating lip glosses and liquid lip balms with this same type of applicator. It doesn't mean that it's a dupe for the Dior. For me, the Dior Lip Glow Oil is a little bit of a thinner formula than the NYX. When it goes on, it feels more like a lip gloss to me. It has a lot of glossy sheen to it. It's actually a little bit sticky. And the Dior has one of those pH adjusting formulas where the color that you see in the bottle isn't really what you get. It's going to kind of deepen and change depending on your skin. I mean, it's a beautiful product. I really like it a lot, but I just don't feel like the NYX is that similar. The NYX one, going on, it feels a little bit thicker. It has more of a cushiony texture, sort of like a liquid lip balm versus a gloss. I do think the NYX one also has the tendency to feel a little bit sticky once you've been wearing it for a while, so they have that in common, but I just think the NYX is a little bit thicker, and also it doesn't have the pH adjusting factor that the Dior ones have, and I think the NYX ones are just much more pigmented. They offer a lot more color payoff than the Dior does, and you can control what color that is, because with the Dior one, I feel like this turns my lips a really bright shade of pink, whereas the NYX one, if I don't want that color, I can just grab the nude shade, or there's a really pretty purple one. Like, there's different options that you can choose from. So I actually like the NYX one. I know there are people out there who do not like these because they feel too thick or too sticky. I happen to like it because I have really dry lips, and these thicker, richer formulas just tend to hold in the moisture better for me. I also prefer this to the Dior, like I said, just because I'm not crazy about the color that this turns on me, and I like that this one doesn't have the pH stuff in it. But either way, I wouldn't call these two dupes. I think they feel quite a bit different, and just the pigment level and everything is just completely different. They have the same applicator, that's about it. The next product is one that people have been calling a dupe for quite a while, and that's the e.l.f. bite-sized palettes. So these are supposedly, according to the internet, a dupe for the Natasha Denona mini palettes. And again, I just don't see this at all. I'm not knocking these e.l.f. palettes. These are amazing. I really enjoy these a lot. I think the formula is so good, but I also don't see them being dupes for these for a couple reasons. The first one is obviously the formula. Again, I really like the e.l.f. formula, and I sometimes prefer it to Natasha Denona because I just find it to be a little bit more blendable. Natasha Denona can definitely pack some pigment, and I find that when I'm in a hurry, using the e.l.f. bite-sized palette is just much easier than sitting there trying to blend and blend for a while. So I have no issues with these at all. That being said, formulas are completely different. The second difference, which I think Natasha Denona has in her favor, is that the e.l.f. ones have 4 shades and these have 5. And I think that's my biggest gripe with the e.l.f. palettes, is that many of them include a really light matte shade and a really deep one and 2 shimmers, but there's no crease color. And for me, that's like the most important shade. That's the one that I always start with. I could probably take or leave this lighter one right here. If I have a crease shade and then I have something darker like to put in my outer corner, I'm good, but so many of these don't have a crease color, so then I'm forced to go into another palette to get one. And I feel like that just prevents me from using these as often, whereas the Natasha Denona ones, they have that extra shade in there, so there's more to play with. I'm not saying that all of them always have the perfect crease color either, but more of them do than the e.l.f. bite-sized palettes. I think this is just a little bit more complete. I could make a complete look with this one, whereas the e.l.f. one, I'm always usually forced to just go into another palette, or occasionally I'll just use it as a one and done. Like I'll just grab one of the shimmer shades and put it on my lid and that's it. So yes, both of these are mini travel size palettes, but I just don't see the formulas being very similar at all. And you're also getting that extra shade in the Natasha Denona, which I really wish that e.l.f. would have done. So again, formulas are very different. The Natasha Denona one will give you an extra color in there to play with. Are they similar mini travel size palettes? Yes. Do I feel like they're dupes? No. All right, so that's all I have for today's video, but if you'd like to see this become a series, let me know what your favorite products are that are not dupes down below, and maybe in the next one, I'll include your responses. So definitely let me know, and if you have some extra time and you'd like to check out some more of my videos, I'll just put something right up here for you to check out next. And I want to thank you all so much for spending time with me here today. I really, truly appreciate it. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all in my next one. Take care, guys. Bye.